Hey everybody, I'm Dan Harris of the FantasyPros Football Podcast. Thanks for joining us today. Don't forget to check out all of our great content over at youtube.com/fantasypros and follow us over on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at FantasyPros so you don't miss any of our content this year. But today, let's talk about our top 12 potential league winners for this year's fantasy football season. Alright, let's start with the running backs at number 12 here, and let's begin with Joe Mixon. Yeah, Mixon plays for a terrible team, but his offense is probably going to be pretty good this season, with the additions of Joe Burrow and T. Higgins, and with the return of A.J. Green and John Ross from injury. But really, what this comes down to is that Mixon has true 1-1 talent in an up-tempo offense like Zach Taylor wants to run. Mixon has the receiving chops to become a true 3-down, game script-proof bell cow, and in an improved offense, that could take him into the top 2 or 3 for the position. Alright, let's go to number 11, and that is Kenyan Drake. A lot like Mixon, Drake plays in a fast-paced offense, which is going to run 17 or 18 games worth of plays this season. That comes in handy from a fantasy football perspective, and his volume is sure to be higher than most others at the position. Not only that, but Drake was spectacular from the time he landed on the Cardinals, finishing the season as the number 4 fantasy back over the final 8 weeks, despite not knowing the playbook when he came over. Add in DeAndre Hopkins and an improved offensive line to this offense, and Drake could explode into the top tier of fantasy backs. Checking in at number 10 is RAHEEM MOSTERT. There's always some risk when drafting Kyle Shanahan running back since he changes starters so often, but there is a potential huge reward with Mostert. Check out the list of running backs with the most fantasy points over any 8-week stretch last season. Christian McCaffrey, 205.9 points, ADP, number 1. Derrick Henry, 171.7 points, ADP, number 7. Dalvin Cook, 163.6 points, ADP, number 4. Aaron Jones, 151.4 points, ADP, number 17. RAHEEM MOSTERT, 149.2 points, ADP, number 70. Ezekiel Elliott, 133.8 points, ADP, number 3. And KENYAN Drake, 131.4 points, ADP, number 30. Those were the only 8 weeks Mostert started for the 49ers. He has a legitimate chance to be a top 5 fantasy running back, and yet you can get him easily as your RB2 or 3. At number 9, it's Damien Harris. Look, we all know Sony Michel's performance has been uninspiring since the Patriots drafted him. But did you know that he had off-season foot surgery in the spring? Foot injuries are an absolute nightmare to come back from. Don't be surprised if Harris gets the starting gig from the get-go. You can say he didn't get many touches last year, but Bill Belichick only makes backup running backs active when they are third down options or used on special teams. Harris is neither. Instead, he could play the Stephen Ridley role this season in a run-heavy offense. Turning to wide receivers now, at number 8 checks in Adam Thielen. In 2017, Thielen broke out as a top 12 fantasy receiver and then proceeded to be wide receiver number 7 in 2018. Yes, he was a disappointment in 2019 from a fantasy perspective, but that had everything to do with his injury and pretty much nothing to do with his performance. Prior to the Week 7 injury, Thielen was once again a top 8 fantasy wideout. Now that Stephon Diggs is gone, Thielen legitimately has a shot at leading the NFL in targets. At number 7 is Calvin Ridley. Ridley's been among the most efficient receivers since he joined the league in both touchdown rate and yards per target. The problem has been that the Falcons have only given him 92 and 93 targets respectively in the first 2 seasons of his career, in part at least due to an injury last season. Now that he should finally see more targets, he could have a Chris Godwin-like explosion. At number 6, it's Sammy Watkins. You can say whatever you want about Watkins being an overall disappointment, but when he was actually healthy, Watkins was a top 10 fantasy wideout through 8 games, and was the Chiefs' top receiver in the playoffs. The former top 5 pick has tons of upside for a late round wideout because of his ability, but also the presence of Patrick Mahomes. At this point in Watkins' career, you don't have to invest much to buy the lottery ticket. At number 5, it's BRESHAD PERRIMAN. Although Sam Darnold missed a portion of the season with mononucleosis and had virtually no weapons or offensive line to support him, he really wasn't that bad for a 22-year-old. There's still a chance that he breaks out in a major way, and if he does, PERRIMAN just might be his top receiver. The former first-round pick is an electric athlete who finally made his way onto the field when Mike Evans was injured last year. PERRIMAN produced 506 yards and 5 scores in the final 5 weeks and looked tremendous on tape in the process. Switching over to tight ends, at number 4 we have Jonnu Smith. Do you remember when TJ Hawkinson dominated the NFL Combine just 2 years ago? Well, Smith is the same size, but faster, stronger, quicker, and a better leaper. If you are looking for this year's version of Darren Waller, it's difficult to look beyond the supreme athlete moving into a much larger role in one of the NFL's better offenses. You can grab Smith late in your drafts, and if it doesn't work out, you just move over to streaming the position. Checking in at number 3 is Tyler HIGBEE. HIGBEE does have some question marks with Gerald Everett returning, a more challenging schedule than last year, and plenty of talent at the wide receiver position. But his 5-game stretch at the end of last season was better than any 5-game stretch in Rob Gronkowski's, Antonio Gates, Tony Gonzalez, or Travis Kelce's career. There is of course a chance he busts, but if you are looking for that next elite tight end, the list starts with HIGBEE's ridiculous stretch to finish last season. Let's finish up with quarterbacks here, and at number 2 is Aaron Rodgers. Rodgers has taken a major step back in the last few seasons from a fantasy standpoint, but frankly, his efficiency numbers are still tremendous. And the only thing really holding him back from having been a top 3 fantasy quarterback is an artificially low touchdown rate. If he just had his career touchdown rate last year, which is a highly volatile stat by the way, Rodgers would have finished among the top 2 fantasy quarterbacks for the 8th time in his 10 healthy seasons. You can get him as a fringe quarterback 1 this year, and he just might be a top 2 quarterback once again if everything breaks right. And finally, number 1, Ryan Tannehill. From the time Tannehill took over as the starter in Tennessee in Week 7, he was the best quarterback in football. Seriously. In fact, he became just the 5th quarterback of all time to post 10 or more adjusted yards per passing attempt. In fact, Tannehill had 1.09 more yards per attempt than any other quarterback in the final 11 weeks. Guys, Tannehill was ridiculous as the starter. And it just isn't true that Tannehill has always been terrible. Prior to his injuries and the arrival of Adam Gase in 2016, he was number 3 all-time behind Peyton Manning and Dan Marino in passing yards during the first 4 seasons of a career, and top 10 all-time in most touchdowns. His interception rate, top 10 best, and he accomplished all of this with lackluster weapons and a struggling offensive line. And that's going to wrap up my top 12 potential league winners for the 2020 fantasy football season. Let us know in the comment section who your potential league winners are. And don't forget to click that subscribe and notification button so you don't miss out on any of our great content this season.